All right. Our enrollment is slowing down. We still have 4 folks joining, but let's go ahead and get started. So thank you for attending this afternoon's webinar. We will be talking about how we at Eduphoria can support you with House Bill 4545. On today's webinar, I'm Jason Martinez. Know a lot of you out there. And then doing most of the presentation today will be Emily Cram, our product manager for curriculum instruction and assessment. As always, this webinar will be recorded. Some of you have already asked some questions about that. All our webinars are recorded, and as you see, you'll get a link to them if you registered automatically within 24 hours of now with a link to that webinar. And as you can see here below that, all our webinars from the past, we have them available for you on our YouTube channel, so please make sure that you reference that. And so just like all of those, we have that there for you. We will be trying to attempt to answer questions today. Like always, if you'll use the Q&A for questions, I know that the chat is enabled and we have that chat enabled to share some links with you and stuff like that. But if you have questions, we will not monitor the chat near as closely as we're going to monitor the Q&A. So as you go through the webinar today, if a question pops up in your head and you want to ask it, first of all, please make sure you try to stay on topic. We are not the TEA, and we will not have a whole lot of questions on to answer. We may refer you to TEA on a lot of things, but if it's something regarding part of the webinar that Em is going to share about the things that we can do for you to help you with House Bill 4545, we'll absolutely answer those questions. And so please use the Q&A for that. Any other topics, as it says at the bottom, and this will be repeated probably toward the end of the webinar as well, or topics, specific topics to your district on how we can help you with House Bill 4545, you can always email training@eduphoria.net. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Emily now, and she'll take care of most of the rest.
Okay, well, good afternoon. Welcome. I am so glad that everyone could be here. Really quick, if you could go back one slide, Joel, I was going to briefly cover the agenda and just walk you through some of the major topics for today. We normally probably start with some sort of fun little icebreaker or gauging activity, but we have a lot of content today, and I really want to honor your time, so we're going to go over as much as we can within the allotted time. So things that we will cover are a brief overview for House Bill 4545, identifying students related to this House bill, the monitoring of students, the student portfolio, and then some additional tools and applications that we have that can also be a support for House Bill 4545. So lots of information today. Okay, I'll go ahead and talk about House Bill 4545, just a little bit of overview information. And just some of the implications aligned with this particular House bill. So the first thing is I just want to make sure you understand the resources that we have available for you. So we will have this webinar and the slide deck be emailed to you tomorrow. If you attended and participated, then you're going to get the slide deck with all this information. So you can see that the TEA House Bill 4545 website is linked here with all of their resources. I will go ahead and tell you, if you missed anything, they are being very good and very quick to put all of their webinars and their slide decks on this particular website at the bottom of the page. So if you need any additional information, that's a great place to go. In addition, we have an Eduphoria support article that has tons of links and it has references according to what we're talking about today that you can go to and you can navigate there as well. So the major implications of House Bill 4545, if you're not as familiar, just kind of a brief information piece related to it, is that it removed the SSI requirements for 5th and 8th grade. And it moved us into a place where we are going to have intervention for all students who did not approach on a STAR assessment for every subject area. In addition, there will be logistical committees in place for students who do not approach on 3rd, 5th, or 8th grade reading. I have the next slide will show you a brief picture of what really helps you to denote these two areas in the triangle. So the students that did not approach for a subject area will have 30 hours of intervention. There are some slight caveats to that related to TEI districts or districts that have national board certified teachers. Otherwise, you'll also see the implications for a student that is 3rd, 5th, or 8th grade, math or reading, that did not approach either one of these assessments. They will be required to have an accelerated learning committee meet on their behalf. So those are some of the major implications, and honestly, really about as deep as I'm going to get into the interpretation of the legislation today. So some things that, if you paid attention to this and if you're read up, some things that probably came to mind immediately after hearing the implications of House Bill 4545 are just that you absolutely need a way to identify students that qualify for this House bill. You're also going to need some tracking mechanisms for progress monitoring and some tracking mechanisms for intervention strategies. We also are going to share information regarding how teachers can share out this information. I know that intervention and the small groups that they are requesting for intervention for these subject areas may lend itself to having additional teachers support intervention. So we have ways that teachers can share their rostered courses. And then last, of course, you're going to need a way to assess these students for multiple reasons, not even just progress monitoring, but some identification methods in the beginning as well. Okay, so let's start with our first area of the agenda. We're going to talk about identifying students in AWARE and some pieces that you'll have access to and some tools that you have in AWARE for helping support you in the process of doing this. Okay, so our first recommendation is Axiom. If you weren't able to attend our webinar last month on Axiom, I have it linked in the slide deck, which is why the title of Axiom is blue, so that you could go back and you could watch that if you missed it last month. But an update for you is all districts were given free access to Axiom temporarily. Since this year accountability was slightly different, we gave you that access, and Axiom is a great way and really our leading way to recommend that you go first identify the students that did not approach grade level on one of these assessments. So I put in here just a little bit of tips after you get into Axiom, then you'll navigate to the total group of students for a particular area. And then you'll see a screen like we have in the middle, and there is a category that says does not meet grade level. You can filter that to yes, and you will automatically have your group of students that met that qualification, that did not approach grade level. And therefore at the top, there's a button allowing you to create a monitor group for those students. And that is the most simplistic way to navigate through and also create a monitor group. If you're not as familiar with monitor groups, don't worry, we're going to cover those in great detail in just a little bit. But if you're starting to think inside the terms of House Bill 4545, you could also want to create separate monitor groups for students in 3, 5, and 8 that did not approach grade level, or as the title here says, does not meet grade level, and create a separate monitor group for those particular students, since you know that they're going to require a committee meeting. It's just another quick way to flag and identify those students. As a reminder, I'm just going to remind you here, when you create a monitor group from Axiom, be sure to go rename it. It does give it a funny name, like I showed you below, District Index 1, no score. You will definitely want to go rename that for transparency, so everyone understands what that group actually is and who it is, who should be associated with that particular group. Okay, on the next slide. So this is an image that I was going to share with you. I worked with El Paso ISD, and thank you, El Paso, to be able to provide you this screenshot and show you that this is kind of another layer of identifying students. So not only did you have to identify students who did not approach on one of the STAR assessments, but you also need to identify students who did not take a STAR assessment on the day of the assessment. Since there are not results for those students, then they want you to identify who those students are, and there are some implications for assessing those students at the beginning of the year according to your local policy and seeing if they meet the criteria for not receiving intervention. So if they do well on a designated assessment, then you could relieve them of their need to do 30 hours of intervention. So for this process is a little bit more detailed. You will go in and create a data view in Aware. And from here, you can set up a filter. The filter is in the administration information folder. And what I have noticed is that the code of absent or other related to this particular field will provide you students who did not take a STAR test. So you can see it on the screenshot there. The students listed, they don't have a score. You'll see next to them, they don't have a percent score in most of these cases where it says other or absent, and that's because they didn't take a test. So you could easily filter by those two areas, and then you could create yourself a universal spreadsheet. You could also create a monitor group, which we'll cover later, to make sure that you have those students and know that they need to take an assessment at the beginning of the year. I included a video in the bottom of this screen so that you can go back and reference it. And the video walks you through exactly how to make this particular data view. So I wanted to be helpful because that's one of those pieces that's probably a little new and different. It's a field that you wouldn't regularly use. So when you get the email tomorrow with the slide deck, you'll have that video to utilize. Okay, so now that we talked about identification, we're going to move into monitor groups. You've already heard me say it a few times and briefly mention monitor groups and how powerful they are. So I'm going to get into more of the meat of monitor groups and the purpose and why you're doing this. Okay, so before I kind of go into the building and utilizing of monitor groups, I want to pause. You've already been given a lot of information, and I want to give you just a little think piece before you start just diving into creating monitor groups. As you start thinking about this, monitor groups will be very specific to your district size. So if you have a large district, then you might want to create monitor groups by content area and grade level. That just helps to organize so that it is a little bit more direct in your groups in order to have those available for teachers. And I'm about to talk to you about all the ways that they're available. If you are a smaller school district, then really my recommendation is that you make a monitor group maybe just by the content area. So again, just start thinking about the size of your district and what might be the best organizational path for monitor groups. So a larger district, the smaller the group, probably the more beneficial. And at a smaller school district, you can probably make just a few groups in order to keep this organized. So I just kind of want to plant that seed, and I'll revisit it as we address areas that are appropriate. As you're looking at the screen right here, it shows a particular data view that has already been filtered by specific students. And so with this view right here, the wonderful thing about creating data views in Aware is that it already identified that you created a filter on this data view. And so the button that says add to group automatically pops up. It recognizes a filter is there, so it's its way of asking you, would you like to add these students to a monitor group? And if you select that button, it will take you through a wonderful little wizard that will allow you to set up your monitor group specifically. And then you will have that group that was identified in this data view automatically. So that is a great tool that is already available to you. One piece that I also wanted to mention is that this data view that I'm showing you, I covered it in the video that is attached in the slide above that we did prior, because I also in the video walk you through how to create a generic spreadsheet for all of your students who did not approach. And so you may have a desire that you want a spreadsheet of all your third grade math students who did not approach on the assessment. And if you're familiar with using our EOC tracker report, in my video, I walk you through how to create a data view just like this so that you can have a master spreadsheet and you can see if students did not pass multiple assessments in that particular data view or in your spreadsheet. And so I just wanted to reiterate that I provided both of those in the video for you to go back and reference. That would be something I know I would want if I was creating this and keeping track of it. Some other pieces that are really great to consider, in addition to the ability to create a monitor group, is that it creates an automatic sense of transparency to your teachers. So if you have created a monitor group for, we'll stick with third grade math, the students who did not approach on STAR, after you create that monitor group, every teacher who teaches one of those students identified will be able to see the monitor group. They will see it. They'll be able to see all the identified and associated students with the monitor group, and they can click on their name and have automatic access to the student information for that particular student. So great pieces to add into the system just so it's very clear the group of students that you're addressing for each one of these. Okay, and I'm going to keep talking about the benefits of monitor groups. Back in the day, if you ever attended any of my trainings, you'll know that I love monitor groups, and the power of monitor groups is just incredible. So I already mentioned that every teacher can see the monitor group. In addition, assessments can be filtered to only apply to this group of students. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I put next to it the BOY assessment from the LEA. So again, if a student didn't take a STAR test, and so they're in that second identified group, you could create a monitor group for that group of students who didn't take an assessment. You know that they need to take an assessment at the beginning of the year in order to identify them as, yes, they need intervention, or no, they qualify and they don't need intervention. So if you have that as a monitor group, you can filter that beginning of year assessment to only those students. So yay, I'll give that a second to sink in because that is very, very powerful. In addition, we're going to talk about forms after this. So forms can be easily or more easily mass assigned if you have a monitor group. It's the first step for you to grab those student IDs. And if you took it into Excel, you could easily start mass assigning forms to students because you took the time to create a monitor group. And then the last is probably my favorite. You can look at data views and create your own and filter them to only view the students who are in the monitor group. So if you think about that, that is amazing as well. As these students qualify for intervention and they need to continue through the intervention pathway, what better way to monitor their progress than to pull in the monitor group and filter by that particular group. You can see over time, if you line up each assessment, how are these students doing over time? Are we seeing improvement because of intervention? Are we not? Because that could mean we want to go revisit our form structure, our communication, and our intervention strategies because the student is not showing progress. And by having this monitor group, you can automatically pull it into a data view and filter to view their progress. So probably the most powerful thing the system does, in my opinion. Okay, another area that this is fairly new. I say fairly new, it's been out a little while, but a lot of people don't know about this additional feature that is just wonderful in the system. So what we have is we have the ability for teachers to share out their rostered courses. This is huge. So before, that's one of the implications of using the system. As a teacher, I only see my rostered courses. That's completely appropriate. There are needs for me to share my class roster with a variety of different people involved in instruction as well. So with the Share My Classes tool, a teacher can either choose to share out a class period in its entirety with another user, or they could select particular students that they want to share out with as well. So this is a great feature, again, that's underutilized. I always get such a happy face from people when I share out this information, and it's available now. And again, the Share My Classes that's linked here in blue will give you the online help article to walk you through exactly how you do this. Okay, we are already moving on to creating and utilizing forms. I'm going to stop because, again, we've already covered a lot of information. We already talked about identifying students. So 2 different ways to identify students, either Axiom or creating a data view. We also talked about creating monitor groups and really the power of creating monitor groups and sharing classes. So we've already covered quite a bit of information, and it all builds onto each other. So I'm going to pause briefly and just make sure there's not any direct questions I can answer before I move on.
I don't know that there's any direct questions. I did want to make a statement. So just in general, what Emily's showing, and most of you expert folks out there that we know of, a lot of you we know, these are not skills necessarily that are new. These are not things that we created specifically for House Bill 4545. As Emily's showing, these are things that Aware has been able to do all along, creating custom data views, filtering for different students, highlighting students. She's about to show student forums. Those are not new. And so some of you may not have had these skills or may not know that these things exist. Yes, this is in the context of House Bill 4545, but that may just be a trigger for you to say, hey, we could be using this for other things within our school district as well. And so if these things are new to you, or you're just not as fluent with them as you would like to be, as we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, and as we will continue to mention at the end, if you will email training@eduphoria.net, we can speak to you directly about House Bill 4545 things, or in the context of something bigger, because these skills can help you in much more than just House Bill 4545.
Yes, thank you for saying that, Jason. That was one of the parts that we were probably the most excited about in communication with districts. Our first question that we were asked by districts is, what are you releasing to support us in this process? And the answer is nothing, because the system already does everything that it needs to support you for House Bill 4545. That's not saying we absolutely want you to send in thoughts or things that come to your brain that you need additional support on as you get in the weeds of this. Of course, we want to hear those out. But as of these processes we're covering today, all of this has been established in the system. So very exciting. Okay, we are moving on to creating and using forms. And so as a brief little intro to forms, if you are new or you haven't utilized forms within Aware, the basic principle that I always told teachers and administrators when doing training is think of a form as being a permanent record file that is attached to a student. So we used to all have those folders and those cabinets in every campus that we had permanent record files, students. Luckily, we're getting away from that, but Aware is your house for that. So any form that is attached to a student, it is just like a permanent record. It automatically, every year, it will archive itself in a form that a teacher can go and look at forms historically for every year that the student has been associated with your school district. So very, very powerful that a teacher can see historically over time everything that's been done for a student if you are documenting it using forms. So that's just a little foundation for the purpose behind forms. It is directly tied to the student. So what we're going to talk about here is we don't have time to go through a full how-to with the forms, but what I have already done in preparation for this is I created a House Bill 4545 intervention documentation. It just has some fields in this form that will cover some basic logistics for documenting and pulling in data. One of the great parts of a form is that it will pull in historical data into the form. It'll pull in whatever data you designate that you want in the form. So over time, you can see assessment data, you can add your intervention strategies, your resources, all of this. And the form is available to every teacher who teaches that particular student, and of course, administrators on the campus. So the first thing is, if you can't see forms, if you don't have a forms tab, then you'll want to make sure that you are a student forms administrator. There's 2 levels of access for forms. You can be a campus forms administrator, or you can be a district form administrator. The one caveat I'll stress, it's absolutely wonderful if you are a campus form administrator, but if you want to be creating forms for your entire district to utilize, then it is a better practice, or it's a little bit more simplistic for time, if a district administrator creates the form. Because if you think about it, at the district level, that makes the form available to all of the campuses. If one particular campus creates a form, nobody else can see it who's not associated with that campus. So just as a little background before you start going in and creating these forms, it would be better if it was a district administrator who did that. Okay, but back to the form that we have. Like I said, I went in and created one, and it's available in the community of forms. So again, if you're not familiar with Aware, one of the most beautiful things about forms is that we do have a community that you can go browse, and there are folders for each designated area, and you can see what other school districts are using and what forms are available, because you can easily publish a form to the community. So this one is published. The title is House Bill 4545 Intervention Documentation. And if you go search the community, you can easily import it into your district. And at that point, if you decide, I don't like some of this stuff Emily put on there, no big deal. You delete it, you add what you want, you add the specifics to it. But if you're with me, it's a whole lot better to start from someone else's form than to create one from scratch. I'm going to pause for an amen. You can say it out loud wherever you are. And so this will already be available for you that you can go use and grab. So hopefully it's at least a helpful start for you. Okay, I gave you a little bit more information on the same thing. Notice that community forms on the top of this and on the last slide is blue because it's linked to the article to help you get there and to help you find it. So I tried to take care of you so that you didn't have to wander aimlessly. So every link in here is to provide that extra layer of support. Here is my first form that I did create that I just talked about, and I also created an accelerated learning committee form. This one is deep and it is detailed, and it has 3 pages of information that you may absolutely not need, but it has tons of information that that committee may review and discussion points that they may talk about during that time. So both of those are available for you to grab and pull in and use, tweak, whatever you would like to do. So those are available. Okay. Now let's talk about, let's move past, let's say you got in the form, you edited it, it is shiny, it's pretty, it is ready to go, and you have already published your form. Yay! So now you need to know, how do I attach this form to students? If it's part of their permanent record, how do I begin attaching this form to the particular students? And there's 2 ways to do this. Again, going back to the number of students identified in your district would probably lend itself to how you do this. But my gut tells me you probably still want to mass assign this form just for ease of time, because that's the optimal way to do it. The other option is to assign the form one student at a time. So that direction, you would navigate to the student tab, search for a student. Once you click on their name, you'll see forms, and you can add the form to the student. The other way that is much, much faster is under the Forms tab, there is a button that says Mass Assign Form. And you can go in and you'll see the screen below that you can attach it to the new students. And if you've already created your lovely little EOC tracker type of report that I mentioned, for you to really keep track of these students, then you'll already have their ID number. If you created monitor groups, you'll already have their ID number that you could easily pull into a data view, and all you need to mass assign a form is the student's ID number. So it's going to ask you what students to assign it to, you upload their IDs, and you tell it which form you want to assign, and then it's done. And it's available for all the teachers of record to go in and look at and start documenting. If you did put in fields that contain data, the data will auto-populate upon mass assignment. Oof, that was a mouthful, but yes, that's correct. The data will auto-populate. So all of that good information will be in there, other than what you decide to document for tracking and progress monitoring. Okay, so here are two of the additional perks that you get from using forms. On the student tab, once a form is assigned to students, you can type in the form name in that search menu, and it will show you all the students associated with that form. Just an easy, quick way for you to identify who meets that criteria. And again, another powerful piece is once a student form is attached, you could use the data fields provided in creating your own data view under columns to pull in the name of that student form, and you could filter by that particular form. So maybe you do only want to see the students who qualified and have an ALC committee, then you could pull in that particular form and you could filter by a view. And so that is an easy way, and you've already created the back-end processes for doing so. So just wonderful perks that come from your work. It's not in vain. You get to use it in multiple different ways. Okay, so now let's talk about how you would view some of the usage of a form or the data attached to a form. You really have, I really like the tracking associated with the particular form. When you create one, under the form itself, under the Forms tab, there will be tabs at the top. You can see those in the first screenshot. The tabs will be general, security, form editor, all those things. And one of the tabs is called log. And underneath the log, you can see two different views. One is going to be a detailed view that gives you a date and time stamp of who viewed it, what day, what time. The other option is you can see a schedule view, which is the second screenshot below, and it will show you every course that student is enrolled in, and if the teacher looked at the form, and again with that date and time. So you have a schedule view, or you have the detailed view that goes in order by date and time. In addition, there are reports that you can run. So some mass reports you can run to see overview of forms over time, and those are excellent as well. But being able to keep track of and say who has looked at this and who is intervening for this student is a very powerful thing in and of itself. Oh, if you go one back, thank you. Okay, so the next question that's come up with every district that I've talked to, they've always said, what do we need to do to log student hours? So we know that they have to have 30 hours of intervention. So how are you recommending that we log this time? And so I really want to be very open with this. This is truly our understanding of both district conversation and questions from TEA and information that we have received. So just an understanding of an interpretation. So what I understand in other districts as well, that logging of student hours is not needed. So what TEA has highly recommended is for you to create a course that is part of your master schedule for intervention. So this could be before school, this could be after school, this could be in the middle of the traditional school day. So if you do have a course in your master schedule, then you would keep attendance for the students who come to intervention. That in and of itself, with the time within your master schedule, is a way to keep track of your intervention hours for students. Again, it's my understanding that this is going to be the best practice from TEA, so not to have teachers try to log any of this, but to create the course as a part of your master schedule. If you do have additional questions about that, please reach out to TEA and ask for clarification, because again, this is our understanding based on conversations that we have had. Okay, moving along, we're going to talk about student portfolios. If you haven't ventured into student portfolios, they are absolutely wonderful that teachers have access to and can create in order to truly see student growth over time. And so we're going to talk about how those lend itself to supporting some of the need for House Bill 4545. Okay, so if you haven't seen portfolios, again, I linked some information that's general about creating a portfolio and what the purpose is and all of those pieces. It is something that teachers see. So by default, if you're an administrator, you're not going to log in and see a portfolio. The teachers have access to see the portfolios, and they can create one for a group of students or for their whole class. And they get to decide what are milestones for the actual portfolio, and those would be skill sets. So what is a skill set I'm going to monitor? And that could look various different ways. So that could be an assessment, that could be a learning activity in class, but how am I going to monitor if the student is actually growing? You can create those milestones, and then you can document levels. So that these could be teacher defined levels. These could be district defined levels for student growth over time. You'll see in my screenshot, it has below typical, above typical, typical. It has just different criteria that you can establish. You can do ranking, and there's a little notepad where you can even make notes on what you've seen, evidence, thoughts, all of those things. So these milestones could also be a great tool to document what teachers are seeing in intervention, so that you have this great portfolio that can show exactly what's being done and what the teacher sees during that time. The other amazing part to portfolios is that they can be tagged in a teacher's growth goal within Strive. So if a teacher has established a student growth goal, they could easily go in and attach their student portfolio, and it would be evidence of how they are working to obtain that goal. In my opinion, these naturally lend themselves together. If there are a group of students identified that aren't on grade level, that's an excellent teacher goal. How can I get them as close to grade level as possible? And that student portfolio would be a great way to document that over time, attach it to a goal, and then have a reflection process at the end of the year regarding that goal. So all of these behaviors lend themselves perfectly together for a best practice. So again, that's just another tool that you could utilize. They can be shared with other users as well. And again, I attached some reference articles for you if you're not as familiar with student portfolios. Okay, we are digging into other applications, and we're getting toward the end. So I apologize if your brain is on overload and you're ready for a brown bag to deeply breathe into. I apologize, but this is recorded and you can watch segments of time as much as you want, or maybe you never want to go back and view it again. Let's hope that's not the case. But some other applications, of course, I joke all the time that I don't have a whole lot of hobbies other than Eduphoria, so I think about this kind of stuff a lot. I already thought of 2 other applications that lend itself very well to House Bill 4545, and honestly, this morning I thought of another one, so I'll openly share that out as well. But the first piece I already alluded to, I got excited, I got ahead of myself, but House Bill 4545 and Strive is, again, that teacher goal. So if a teacher has established a student growth goal, this is what it looks like when they tie that portfolio to the actual goal that they have within Strive that is approved by an administrator. You can provide evidence in it, and then that goal, or that portfolio, sorry, is already attached. So that's just a little bit about what that looks like. And then there's the links that go with it as well. Okay, Forethought. This one I also get very excited about. If your district is a Forethought district, so you're using the lesson planning component of Eduphoria, then it works very, very well in conjunction with House Bill 4545. So what it can do for you is your teachers could easily add an intervention period to their lesson planning documents. This is a great way for lots of things to happen. So the teacher can write the lesson plan for what she intends to do during intervention. She or he, I keep saying she or he can connect it to standards. They can also connect strategies. Your district has the ability to create checklists or instructional strategies within Forethought, and you can see some of those in that bluish gray box for teachers to utilize. So if you do have new teachers who aren't necessarily used to doing intervention, you can provide some strategies up there just as a reminder. Everybody loves a reminder of, oh yeah, I haven't done this sort of, I haven't done think, pair, share. I haven't done small grouping. I haven't done cooperative circles. You could lend itself to creating strategies across the board that would help teachers, just as another reference point. And again, you can also lean on the implications of a team planner. So if your teachers do want to get together as a team, maybe it is 5th grade science teachers, and they want to create a team planner, they could all document together in a team effort what they intend to do for intervention. So now it's not one brain, you know, the more brains, the more powerful this could be. And all of this same sort of features are available within a team planner. So just a great added tool for some teacher support mechanisms within planning. Again, another piece of this is I linked where it says connect standards. There is a very, very valuable standard report coverage that you could easily print off for the standards that have been taught in intervention. And if you do give a progress monitoring assessment for these kids, you could cross-reference how many times were these standards taught and what was done on these particular standards by going and looking at the strategies that day. And you can pull up the assessment results and see them side by side. It just makes sense to be able to see what did I teach and how did I teach it and how did they do on the particular assessment in order to solve those problems and address areas of need. So it's just a really big win overall. Oh, and then the other piece that I thought of as well, it's just an idea, but I know that there is an element of House Bill 4545 that does say now that parents have the ability to request a teacher. And so if you want to have, well, you're going to need some sort of mechanism to open up for parent request of a teacher. The legislation does say you don't have to honor that request, but you do have to accept the request that a parent could say, I would prefer my student be in this teacher's class. And so if you do need a designated way for parents to communicate a request, Formspace is another great tool. That was the one that came to me this morning, while I'm getting ready. So you could use Formspace for a parent communication as well. So just another idea for another element of the parent actually requesting a teacher for their student. So, and then I promise that is all the ideas for today. So some conclusions that we have, hopefully a lot, again, hopefully you're not super overwhelmed, but we really wanted to reiterate some of the very influential parts of this particular webinar are that we want to give you the ability to identify your students. That's, of course, first and foremost. We want to give you multiple mechanisms for tracking these students with progress monitoring, and we also want to give you the ability to track intervention strategies that are used. So goal setting is also big, that we talked about how these connections can be made for student growth goals. And then the last element that we really discussed was that lesson planning avenue for really collecting all of these pieces together so that you can truly see the implications of lesson planning with students' test results as well. So those are just some of the conclusions and the big picture pieces that we covered today. I'm going to turn it over to Jason for some of the last couple of pieces, unless we have questions.
No questions. I think we've got it all covered. And so just to kind of reiterate, what Emily's talked about, what we've talked about, this is just a good opportunity for us to talk about things that we like to talk about anytime. And so helping you identify students, House Bill 4545 is just another thing for you to do. And we all understand that stress level of that being, I think it's been about 5 or 6 weeks since that became law, and that goes into effect right at the beginning of the school. So we definitely know that that's a stressor for you guys, and we are absolutely here to help. And so on the next slide there, Joel, it talks about ways to get in touch with us. First and foremost, if you'll just email training@eduphoria.net. In preparing for this webinar, we believe there's going to be a high demand for a need for help out there, and we're here for you. And your help may be just maybe this webinar. Maybe you're very skilled, and those of you out there that are experts as much as we are, and you just needed some information about, I wonder how Eduphoria would recommend we do this. Well, this webinar probably helped you exactly for that, and you're probably good to go. Some of you out there might have never created a student forum before, and so you need some more information about student forums, and so you need a little bit more help. Those things are we'll be able to go, particular situation by situation and help you. And so please, if you want help, whether it's House Bill 4545 related or just in general, I didn't know Aware could do that at all. And so we may just find this as an opportunity for us to use Aware more thoroughly, or obviously, as Emily said, Strive, Forethought, Formspace, all those other things that we obviously have expertise with districts all over the state that have been doing this for a long time. So please reach out and we'll figure out a way to help you.
Thank you so much for attending, and we really want our central message to be that we are here to help you in whatever form you need help or support. We are all educators, and we are always thinking of you. So please reach out to us, and we are happy to help you in any way. Thank you for coming.